parle avec nous aujourd'hui. C'est la première fois que je présente à cette comité. Je suis très fier de mon équipe. Aussi, je suis très fier de le travail à mon équipe. My team works very hard. We're very excited about having a chance. I wish we could certainly give you all the time in the world. We won't take up our time by talking about our accomplishments. Mr. Arsenault would probably say we spend too much time in question period doing that anyway. So we're going to focus on a couple of things, and when it comes to a climate change action plan, I think the key word needs to be action. And so, you know, we would hopefully be able to have a chance to talk to you about action steps, real legitimate work that we're doing as it relates to action on biodiversity and ecological sustainability and how that benefits our climate change objectives. Action on the ability to bring non-emitting green power into our province and work towards our decarbonization goals. And action as it relates to how we can connect all of this to economic development and activity, because in the process of making the planet better, we have the ability to create opportunity, jobs, goodwill and good fortunes as it relates to the citizens of the province of New Brunswick. And I quite frankly feel like we can build a better province as it relates to environmental responsibility while at the same time creating economic activity. Alors, à ce moment, je réponds à ton question. All good?
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for those opening remarks. We'll begin with our questions and the official opposition. Mr. Arsenault, do you want to begin?
Yes, thank you. Just a few quick questions. Thank you for the Minister and the Deputy Minister and staff for being here. They've always been very efficient and effective, so appreciate that you brought the full staff here. The A-team, that's good. Yeah. You talked about decarbonization goals, and one of the things we did here earlier this week about climatic change was the use of small modular reactors as part of the plan to decarbonize. I'm just wondering what the investment that New Brunswick has made, the government of New Brunswick has made in these reactors, some of the strategy for these upstart companies, because it is a new company, it's an upstart company. One of the strategies that upstart companies seem to be using, not everyone, mind you, but they develop, they research, and they create something new, and that's really gung-ho, and all of a sudden, they put it up for sale, and it's sold out. So what provisions has your department made to make sure that we don't lose our investment, that it's protected? Is there do we have shares, and do we get a benefit from it? And so also, if it does decide that it's not successful, is there any way of recouping our investment?
Well, I appreciate the question on that. As with emerging into any innovative industry, and we're going to see more and more in that as we move into a new future about a green economy, there certainly are risks. There's no question about that. What we did, a couple of things, is we really worked hard to put together a funding agreement that protected the province's interests by making it a staged funding agreement. It wasn't just a check and see you around. We did it in such a fashion that it was done in tranches. It was done with matching and exceeding funds, so that as we were developing the project, the viability of the project would indicate that private sector funding would come along and therefore create an opportunity for them to not only match, but exceed the funds that we have invested as a provincial government. So that's from the perspective of protecting New Brunswick's interest. In that process, and when the previous government began down the road, that began us down a road of entrenching this project on the footprint of Point Lepreau. We're only one of two nuclear generating provinces. And there is a significant amount of work that's been done, site-specific to that location, and engineering design work and building to the point of ultimately putting the first of a kind there. So these are not cookie cutters. They're very specific to the engineering and technical components of the footprint from which they're going to go to. So there's been a lot of work entrenching this entire project around the footprint of Point Lepreau. And in addition to that, a significant amount of work done to revitalize the underutilized supply chain we have here in New Brunswick. You see, We are a province that has a history of many, many manufacturing companies, and a hose is a hose, a fitting is a fitting, and we've worked very hard over the last 4 years to flesh out that supply chain so that the people actually putting this together are New Brunswick companies, and so there's a lot of work there. As with every project, there is some risk, but it was the funding and the work to entrench it in New Brunswick was very deliberate and intentional.
Thank you, Minister, and I just want to stand to look. I can't see the clock from where I am, so I just wanted to
You got
check.
2 minutes left.
Well, I would appreciate a little more direct answer. Your first minute of that answer was excellent. You denoted the risk, but I didn't hear the answer that the risk was protected. It's certainly not protected. So that's good. The next thing I heard about decarbonization this week, and didn't hear a lot about it, but the Mactaquac Dam. Mm-hmm. What is the cost of the refurbishment if we go ahead, number one? Number two, give us an update on Mactaquac. I'm told that the negotiations have broken down with our First Nations, with the First Nations of that own the territory. So if you could give me an update on those two items, I would appreciate it.
Sure. The issue of Mactaquac, because this whole week's been talked about decarbonization, and it's a crucial piece of our renewable energy portfolio, and the price to refurbish is significant. We're going to be dealing with a multiple billion-dollar project. I don't have the exact figures in that because that process is about to unfold where we go through it. It is going to be a significant expense. It is a crucial piece of our renewable portfolio. So essentially the short answer is no action is not an option on Mactaquac, yet to determine and roll out exactly how that works. But keep in mind, very important, that the financial component of that will always be under the auspice of the EUB as well. As it relates to work with First Nations, that work is being conducted within the umbrella of the Department of Aboriginal Affairs. I don't have any direct contact with that, and I defer that question to that department.
For that answer. The other, as a follow-up to that, does your department have a formal process of consultation with First Nations?
Yes.
It does?
Yes, it does.
Can you explain that process?
I think that everything really within the Department of Natural Resources and Energy Development would have an aspect of land, water, sea, and air. And so each one of our projects would have a First Nations component to it. As it relates to consultation, it is not, again, a cookie cutter. There would be a variety of different processes depending on the scope, size, and impact of the project. It would have to be specific to projects to outline what the specific process would be.
So the process would be before action is taken, and not as a reporting thing and saying this is what we're doing. There's some consultation, yes, input going into the decision making beforehand.
Yes.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that. I'll pass that over, the rest of the questions then to my other colleague here. Thank you.
Merci, Guy. Thank you, Minister. And I was always wondering why your Deputy Minister had a small binder and you don't have any notes.
Because I got a big mouth.
But I understand now. The first subject, there's 10 initiatives that your department has to do with the climate change plan, specifically. We can't address all 10 today, but the fourth one is about electric vehicles. The objective is to have 6% of small recreational vehicles by 2025. What has already been undertaken? Because the objective is 50% by 2030, so that's very short. And hearing what I'm hearing back home in the rural areas, EVs are not that popular, so how can we accelerate that?
That's a good question. To give you an update, as of March of 2022, we had about 1,300 EVs on the road. As of December of 2022, we're up to like 2,381 or something to that effect. We've got a charging network of 147 chargers, with 44 of them being DC or direct current chargers, fast chargers. And we purport to have a charging unit every 60, 65 kilometers along the major thoroughfares. I come from rural New Brunswick, And I also share that concern, because once you move off the thoroughfares, what are we going to do? And we need to work, because as the incentives come forward, there's going to be more of these on the road. That's a goal that's been set. We need to make sure that programs that are out there to help convert your home into a charging station, we need to make sure they're fully fleshed out and utilized. I'd like to see opportunity come from this, from new technology creates new businesses, and there's certain areas where you might have a small business in a rural area that sees the opportunity to invest in a charger, because that will make them more attractive and bring people in the door. So we have to be all hands on deck. We have to be creative. I would love to have us work with ONB as far as a business model that could create opportunity for people if they wanted to get into that game. And then, of course, we also have to pinpoint areas where there's weaknesses and invest accordingly.
Thank you. And I was wondering, because small vehicles in our rural areas, well, we decide to go to in the woods for a full day. I mean, there's no charging stations in the woods, so hopefully there'll be a strategy around that to convince people first, and then to consider the impact. And if I have a lot of doubts of 50% by 2030.
It's an aggressive target, yeah.
In town, that's fine, but we'll see what we can do next. The next one is measure number 10, which is to eliminate oil in the government buildings. I thought DTI would be responsible for that one, but it's under your portfolio. So what can your department do to reduce or eliminate oil?
DTI is a collaborative partner as it relates to that. We would have a strategy around that. If you want, we can, through the Enhanced Energy Savings Program. Now, for the sake of time, if you'd like, I don't have those details right here, but I can certainly table them for the committee.
Appreciate that one. Thank you very much. You were part also of the discussions around for the whole week that we've had, and I think it was beneficial for everyone, the perspective of the questions that we've asked and what we've heard, everything. How can your department actually finance those 10 actions that are in there? And I'm not only talking about the 23-24 budget, but on the long run, because most of those objectives are for way up to 2025. So will we see a specific line in your budget that you'll present in March about climate change initiatives or programs?
We'll have budget line items that are there specific to items that will positively affect climate change. We might be dealing with the whole of government in funding for some other initiatives. I guess if you have specifics, we can drill down into that, but it will be a combination of Department of Natural Resources and Energy budgeting within, and there will be co-collaborated initiatives within the whole of government as well.
Can then the minister tell us what were the programs available this fiscal year, and can he divulge the next ones that are coming up?
Do we have that? No, that'll be coming out in the budget. Yeah. So there's multiple layers to that. I'll try to be as brief as possible. We will partner with the federal government where appropriate to procure funds. We will procure budgets and work within the climate change action funds that are available through the scope of government. And essentially, we identify the projects that we want to see that accomplish the goals within the climate change action fund, and then primarily go and find the funds that are available, both climate change action, federal funds or whatnot, and put together a request for those to be filtered through us to accomplish those goals.
Thank you. Hopefully we'll see more programs. But one of the programs that we had this year was the heat pump program that was launched, and one contractor to put it out. Can you update us because we heard that there were some changes to that one contractor delivering the program. Can you update us on the status of that program right now?
Absolutely. What I can update you with is that there was a single contractor appointed or through an RFP process to get to the point of applying them. The volume is significant and we need more than that. So what we did is work with the contractor network to the point where we have it ready to open up March 31st to any and all contractors that qualify. And there's a list of those. I don't have the exact number of those that are qualified now, but multiple contractors have now been working with us to ensure that in the event that you qualify as a contractor, there will be no barrier to you participating in the program.
But as of March 31st this year?
March 31st this year, it opens wide open, yeah.
All right. Any other programs for next year or funds for 24 in that program, or was it a one-shot deal?
No, there's multiple funds over 3 fiscal years that are going to be devoted for that. As of
So
right
2
now.
more years?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you very much on that one also. You heard my question to the Minister of Agriculture, and I'll ask you the same one about glyphosate.
Sure.
What is being done on the forest, but also considering the land used by NB Power. So under the lines of NB Power, we've heard some possible solutions there. So what's the update, and is there any regulations coming in shortly?
Sure. First off, on forestry, and I'll work very hard to get a lot of information out in a short period of time. I could sit and talk to you about the Health Canada guidelines that we follow, and that we have, we use 1.7 kilograms per hectare versus the max of 8. I'm not going to do that. But I am going to tell you something that was very, very near and dear to our heart, and that was building and doubling the protected and conserved areas of the province of New Brunswick. And we could do that because we were securing the volume of wood fiber from the areas in the province that do use herbicide. Real quick comparison. The forestry companies are contracted to receive X amount of cubic meters of wood fiber. That's a contractual arrangement. We service and we feed that from the smallest area, being the plantation network. It's about 15% of Crown land. We get the highest yield out of that so that we can then turn around with the other 85% and accomplish goals like doubling the protected areas. In the event that we stopped and arbitrarily removed herbicide from our program, that plantation size would not have the same yield, but the contract would still require those companies to get that wood, which would ironically have a negative impact on conservation, because that would then expand and grow the footprint from which we fed industry, and that would compromise the available land that we have for conservation. So at this particular moment, we use it as a tool, all the guidelines notwithstanding, but at the end of the day, for me personally, it's a tool that allows us to ensure that we have a significant area of Crown land that we can implement biodiverse and ecologically sustainable practices. NB Power, there's work being done there. They changed, they stopped using glyphosate, but they are using another herbicide. What we're doing is working with them to find out what opportunities there are. I rolled out a pilot project where we could work with different wildlife groups to create habitat underneath those, that short bush, low growing habitat. Lots of ideas out there. I would say that there is a significantly lower area under the power lines that are treated every year compared to agriculture or compared to forestry. Okay, that being the case, I don't have anything concrete on that, but we are continually working with them to find out ways that we can be diverse with our vegetation management, but at the same time make sure it's managed, because, well, we're in the middle of a freezing rain episode here today, and we all get scared when stuff hits the lines, so that's an important consideration.
Thank you, Minister. I believe Mike Dawson has some questions for you.
Here today. Much of the action plan will need high-performing utility. NB Power has had many challenges in the past and face many in the future. What is being done to ensure that they will perform better and get better results?
You know, there's a line that I heard not too long ago that I really dialed in on. The NB Power of today is not the NB Power of 100 years ago, but more importantly, the NB Power of 10 years from now cannot be the NB Power of today. There needs to be transformational change within the organization, and we've got a utility now that services transmission, generation, maintenance. There's so many things that the utility handles that we've got to have a serious look at what the utility does. What business are you in, and how do we make sure that you're the best at that business? I think that it's as evidenced by the work we did to support changes at the upper level of management, and also encourage the board of directors to bring in PricewaterhouseCoopers to bring them information that's going to create a strategic plan to accomplish that transformational change, is evidence that we want to move in that direction. Another key thing is the fact that I've been very clear that the results generated by the utility up to date are not acceptable. But I've also been very clear that we need to equip them with the tools and get the politicians out of the way, because we're responsible for over $1 billion of their debt from monkeying around with political promises on freezing rates, as evidenced by, questions that I've been asked about the current rate increase that's before the EUB. I've had folks say, stay away from NB Power, don't monkey with it, and then I get asked, what are you going to do to stop the rate increase? And my answer is, we're going to allow the business to operate like a business with the oversight and guidance of somebody like PricewaterhouseCoopers bringing in the recommendations, and the shareholder directive that when you know better, you got to do better. And I think that if you asked anybody within NB Power, you'd find that from the bottom to the top, the culture is shifting, and we're, as a shareholder, are expecting better results, and through tangible means that we're employing there.
Thank you for that answer. Doubling the protected areas of New Brunswick is great, but can you give us some specifics on how that positively affects climate change?
That's a really good question, because I feel like everything starts from the ground up. Trees eat carbon, and we just protected 400,000 cubic meters of them throughout the landscape of the province of New Brunswick. We did it in a deliberate fashion. We did it with conservation groups, and this conservation lift was done in a different way. We've engaged the NGOs that are centered around conservation, and they told us which were the most the areas that were the most richest in biodiversity, where we would get the most benefit ecologically by preserving and protecting. We did that. We did that with First Nations. We did that with conservation groups, and we did it with an eye towards creating a forest for the future, because the fruition of this won't come to play until long after all of us are gone. We put an 80-year forecast in place to create that future, so you've got the carbon consumption. Coincidentally, when you do that, we with that lift, we did a lot of cold water protection along the Miramichi River system. We did identified areas in the Restigouche River system. And so what does that do? Well, by protecting land, you help water. And in those areas where there's very sensitive ecologies, we feel like we have the ability with this protection to lower the temperature of these waters incrementally. But as we know, incrementally has a huge impact. By entrenching buffer zones around those areas, that'll help reduce siltation. Reducing siltation helps ensure that the maturation and the spawning of fish species will take place in a more beneficial fashion. It's one of those things that land, water, sea, and air, by protecting the size of 19 Fundy National Parks in the province of New Brunswick, the old marine saying is that the incoming tide will rise all boats in the harbor.
Okay. Thank you, Minister. We heard earlier this week that SMR is being a solution for carbon reduction. We also heard that a lot about the new need for renewables. Why is government only focused on SMRs?
You would think that if you watch the media, that is the only focus that we have. And quite frankly, and to the other member's question, Mr. Arsenault, we have put a lot of effort and energy in it. It spanned the course of 2 different governments, and hopefully it will continue to be examined and put under the microscope. And if it can produce the results that we feel, we want to see that go forward, because it's a key role to the decarbonization of our atmosphere, the prosperity of the province of New Brunswick, done in the right fashion. But quietly and unassumingly, we are working and developing a significant amount of renewables that we can move towards ensuring are part of our overall management strategy. There's a pilot project in Shediac that has 400 homes that are working towards complete self-sustainability as it relates to renewables. There's wind RFPs that will be going, like we're working on ensuring that we can expand our wind footprint. We're expanding our solar footprint. We understand the importance of hydrogen, and there's some exciting stuff taking place up there. There's opportunities for us to create green green natural gas in the form of conversion of methane through recycling. There's a lot of things beyond the scope of SMRs that are taking place, and it's important to recognize that 81% of the electricity we generate now in New Brunswick is non-emitting. And so we have to look at the global picture here and say, what we need to continue to close that gap on the 19%, but also look at it in light of the overall picture of the globe. Canada's 25-year climate reduction goals or carbon reduction goals will be wiped away with 1 year's worth of new coal production in China. So we have to have a true global perspective on this and realize that we are fighting a global fight here, and New Brunswick is going to do its part, albeit on a smaller scale, but on a continued scale. The SMRs would be catching a lot of attention, of course it would, but let's not forget the fact that we trudge along as well and make good progress with renewables.
Thank you, Minister. I think that's all my questions. I think myself and my colleagues can agree that you and your staff are doing a great job with the department. And
They sure are.
We have some further questions from the government side.
I'll give you their time.
Seeing as there's none, Ms. Minton, do you have some questions for the department?
Yes.
Or for the minister?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the minister and his team for being here today. I'd like to ask about the renewable portfolio standard. My understanding is it's set at 40%. It has been in the news this week, looking like it might not be met in the upcoming year. But my understanding is that it has been met roughly, the 40% renewables. So can you speak to how the funding will work for, I understand that there's an expression of interest out for, I think it's 220 megawatts of renewable, 50 megawatts of storage. So can you speak to how that works?
That will go out in the form of an expression of interest. That's the preliminary stages, and at that point, the interest will most likely determine what kind of a project that we're looking at. And again, energy is everyone turns on the same switch and gets the same light bulb, but the generation of it is very unique in all of the different projects. So the funding, whether it's in partnership with the utility, whether it would be private sector driven, all of those initiatives as it relates to how it will come to pass, whether it be a PPA that comes, through the utility, they'd be very project specific as they come forward with what the model would be on funding for them.
Okay, so if NB Power is meeting the 40%, so these new potential projects wouldn't be able to be funded by NB Power. Is that accurate?
Well, now, NB Power recently, as you're aware, we did some changes to the Electricity Act. So we have given the utility the ability to, through holding companies, create opportunities to create an entity with which something could be funded and or generate profit. But again, we need to dial in on specific projects to determine exactly how that flows through.
Was there anything else? No. Okay.
My deputy indicated that most likely that they'll procure the power and like they would procure the power from somebody else. Yeah.
Okay, and I guess I'm wondering, would these types of projects, if we're at the 40% limit, it sounds like there's the holding company option, would they be dependent on federal funding, for example? I'm wondering if the 40% hasn't gone up.
Yeah.
As we thought it would.
Yeah.
A long time ago, I found a document that was saying, well, once LaPro's back online, we'll be at 75% for the RPS from about a decade ago. So can you speak to that? Because 40%, it's not where we need to be.
Is the question, do we want to see that ceiling increased? Is that what the question would be?
That's part of the question.
Yeah, well,
And where, and do we require federal funding? And yeah, do we need to increase the 40%?
Yeah, I think that as we evolve and we see more of the ability for us to procure and implement renewables into our system, yes, absolutely. As we see Point Lepreau work towards achieving higher levels of performance and accomplish that percentage output, I think that the natural progression is, and as we close the gap on the 19% of emissions through fossil fuels right now, we have the ability to increase that because we're going to need to generate it. The input will be there, so the output and the percentage could be adjusted. Whether that requires federal funding or not, I would say that the federal government has initiated and launched a number of the initiatives that are requiring us to comply with all of these programs and whatnot. And my experience with them is that they understand that, and they're also going to be a partner as it relates to accomplishing the funding component of it. Because I've had many meetings with the Minister of Enercan, and there's very much an openness there and a willingness to realize that as we embark upon these projects to clean up our electricity grid, to clean up our emissions, that it has to be a collaborative effort. There has to be some sort of a federal-provincial partnership as it relates to accomplishing those goals.
And so specifically going back to the 40%, I think I heard you say, yes, it needs to be increased. So what kind of benchmarks do we have? What kind of timelines?
Short answer is I don't know, and I don't like saying I don't know, but when it's the truth, that's what I have to be. We're working through all of that there right now because, as we said, there's a bunch of changes taking place. As we said, we've acknowledged and recognized that Point Lepreau has to perform at a higher level. That's going to have an effect on it. We've acknowledged that we've got an expression of interest out there for an influx of more renewables. So that's going to all have to kind of come into the machine and come out the other side with some numbers that we don't have. That cake isn't baked at this particular moment. I would agree that increase needs to go up. I don't know what that is. I would agree that federal partnerships are going to be involved in it, but I don't specifically know what that will look like until we start framing up that a little bit better.
Okay, and I guess we wouldn't, I'm not saying to turn down federal money, but we wouldn't necessarily need federal partnerships, and we wouldn't need to worry about that if we were to increase that that amount. I guess I hear you're saying you don't know. I guess it'd be nice to have some ambitious targets or timeline on that.
No,
yeah.
Absolutely, and we will ultimately bring that into some more specifics for sure, but I'll never turn down federal funding.
So I want to ask about energy efficiency. Also wondering, are we being ambitious enough? Are we where we need to be? And I would say no, I think you'd agree. Are we moving fast enough to where we need to go in terms of funding energy efficiency? And there is some specific language specifically around making it more accessible. I guess I'm not saying you're doing nothing, I know that, but I would argue it's not enough. Why not increase the funding to ensure more people have access to, for example, the heat pump program and energy efficiency renovations and efforts?
Absolutely, I would agree that we need to be faster. I agree, 100%, and I'm putting pressure on all sorts of seams and areas where the rivets are starting to bulge the whole time. Funding, of course, is what I want it to run at is it should only be limited by the speed of how we can fund it. We're the funder in government, so we work through some stuff with the contractor network. We get that straightened around. Any contractor in the province of New Brunswick that wants to participate, if they're legitimate, can. Green light there. We want to make sure that it's a simple process on the intake for the citizens of the province of New Brunswick. There's some issues there that we're working through to make sure that gets done in a more timely fashion. The funding, we earmarked funds over the next 2 or 3 years, but that's not going to be enough. We're going to have to put more funds into it. We saw that the recent announcement on the carbon tax backstop is going to require even more creativity as it comes to finding funds to invest in that. I mean, good fiscal management and continuing to see balanced budgets with surpluses give us an option to sit at that table. I know that sitting at that table, for all of my colleagues, that's a commitment that's been made that's going to have to be delivered on, and we're going to have to be creative about it. But again, it's money, and we need to be creative on everywhere we can find it. At the same time, you know, the government is coming up with a number of different other initiatives, whether it be tax income brackets, the student loan debt, and that's not related directly to this program, but that pot gets squeezed and squeezed and squeezed, so we got to be careful how we go about doing it. But I'm all for trying to find more and investing in it, absolutely.
And the thing is that there is a high ROI on energy efficiency. It's good for the local economy, it reduces the energy demand, it saves people money in their homes. It's just win, 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 win. And I heard you say the other day, sort of, oh, well, we don't have $1 billion to invest in energy efficiency, giving everyone a heat pump. Well, looks like you might actually. And so I'm wondering, why not have more ambitious targets written into here? Why not have more funding for energy efficiency? Since we all are agreeing, everyone who's spoken to this is so important. Why not fund it more? Because we know it's only, about 3,700 people a year who are going to be able to access the heat pump program. Like, why not ramp that up?
Well, we got targets that go out multiple years on it, and, you know, we could look at numbers in a very simplistic fashion and say, well, yeah, actually, we've got $1 billion kicking around. But I come from a family with siblings, and if my parents came to the table with the amount that they were giving us as an allowance, so to speak, and I took my brother's piece, he wouldn't be very happy with it. And that $1 billion is not just an amount that could be directed in any particular area.
And I'm not
Yes.
saying $1 billion would go directly to this, but part of it could.
Yeah, well, yes, absolutely. And I agree with having that conversation, and that's incumbent upon me sitting around the table and raising the voice and saying, I think that we need to do more. And we will have to, as a government, fund that. We're committed to it. From the Premier's perspective, from the Minister of Finance, and from myself. So at the end of the day, essentially what we did is said, we could navel gaze forever and a day until we have everything all lined up, or we can launch an initiative and start. And every one of those homes that gets converted is a New Brunswicker that's getting some form of a relief, less carbon that's going into the atmosphere, and a move in the right direction. But it's going to continue, and you're absolutely right. It's going to require all hands on deck and a deliberate effort to fund those initiatives with more resources.
More resources for energy efficiency, absolutely. And this is something I've been calling for years. I was calling
If we
for
don't
people
stop
to give heat
agreeing
pumps.
on everything, I don't know what's going to happen.
But we are agreeing more. Okay, so we're hearing Minister Holland's going to fight for more resources to ramp up energy efficiency. So I like that. And in here, I didn't get a lot of answers yesterday when Minister Holland was here. And one of the questions I was told to ask to you, so I'm going to do that. In the previous plan, there was something about PACE, wasn't completed. And here, in the new plan, it's talking about ensuring New Brunswickers have equitable access to energy efficiency programs through long-term financing and/or payment mechanisms by 2024. And so I was asking, is that PACE basically that you're talking about? Is it something else? What are you talking about? What is going to be available? And how, I guess, how ambitious is it going to be? Are there clear targets and benchmarks for how much access you're going to give to New Brunswickers to improve their energy efficiency?
Well, first of all, Minister Land's pretty shy, so
I've noticed that.
don't want to endeavor to speak for him. PACE could be an option for that, absolutely. We don't have that defined in the form of specifics.
When is it going to be defined?
That's the coming year. Yeah. We'll have that within the coming year.
within the coming year.
Yeah.
And, okay. I guess I will move on then. So, sorry, I've lost my sheet of paper here. I guess I'm wondering if you can speak to the role of your department in terms of energy efficiency, not just for homeowners. So it sounds like there may be a program like PACE coming. You're committed to increasing resources and getting more resources for energy efficiency. Can you speak to your role in terms of, government buildings, in terms of other types of energy efficiency, please?
I sure can. And that's something that we have been working on. We started scratching our heads. You got to remember the Department of Energy was a very limited group of people, right? Essentially, for example, the province of Saskatchewan has, I believe, double-digit staff working on SMRs, and they have no nuclear footprint in Saskatchewan. So when you compare the resources that we have historically had about energy in New Brunswick, they've been limited, and they've been a few and far between. So we've worked hard to add resources as it relates to subject matter experts, technical people, but we started last year with the forming of the SMR Secretariat, which we knew we had to coordinate and do. Go ahead, David.
Okay, sorry, my question was about energy efficiency.
Well, that's what we're going to do, is by creating this, we evolve that into the Energy Secretariat, with which now we funnel every opportunity, not just necessarily a homeowner, but what opportunities do we have on the grand scale for energy efficiency, and how do we position ourselves as a department and almost as a broker to find out what we need. So we're looking there saying, energy efficiency, what do we need? Do we need something from ONB? Do we need something? So we're basically quarterbacking energy efficiency initiatives with whatever resources we need through our department, the utility, other areas of government, and I'm not sure if that's fully fleshing out your answer, but we are open for business on any new existing and completing the energy efficiency initiatives that we're embarked upon.
Thank you, Minister Holland. So that does conclude our question portion of your appearance. But I would like to extend the opportunity to address us with a few closing remarks.
Well, first of all, I just want to say that the ability to go through questions in a rapid-fire fashion like this comes from a spectacular staff who have spent countless hours and years now putting this information into my head so that it can come out every now and then in the form. Yeah. The staff is phenomenal. They have been stretched, they have been pushed, and they have worked very hard to make sure that we're able to address these energy challenges and opportunities as well. The Department of Natural Resources has been alive, and the staff have been very excited because we've been working on the progressive realization of many worthy ideals and accomplishing things that are historic. That being said, there's more to do. There's more to do. And from a rare non-political, non-partisan perspective, I hope that as government, we can continue on these important initiatives in a transitionary fashion, that regardless of who runs the government, regardless of who the minister is, that we continue to do the good work. You're never doing the wrong thing when you're doing the right thing. And I hope and I beg us as elected officials that we don't politicize something as important as our energy future, as important as the decarbonization of our atmosphere, and as important as the ability to benefit our citizens, both financially and economically for the province along the way. It's a pleasure to be here. I wish we had a lot more time. I really do. I sincerely do. And these questions were great, and I want to thank everybody for their time.